Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules Footy Podcast. This is episode 46. This is our round 21 preview. Season 2024 is fast approaching the finish line. 4 rounds left before finals. 45 games of men's AFL left in 2024. Crazy how quickly this season is going. As always, this is our preview episode. It comes live every Friday. We also have a review episode that goes live every Monday, so don't forget to check them out. Spotify and YouTube for every podcast episode. Also on the YouTube channel, plenty of other videos going live every week. There was one just 2 days ago that was a run home video, a look at every team's run home for 2024. So go check that out as well. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. As always, every interaction helps. And we've got plenty of social medias: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of the above. Plenty of content. Go check them all out. And without any further ado, let's jump into football this weekend. And while we're getting up the first game, can we just talk about, just quickly, how bad the AFL did at scheduling football this weekend? They told us that they got rid of Thursday night football because there weren't enough blockbuster games to draw crowds in the second half of the season. And yet they put Collingwood Carlton against Port Adelaide Sydney on Saturday night. Like, what's with that, AFL? Like, surely you can do better than that. Plus, we got 2 Friday night games on at the same time. Okay, yeah, they started an hour and a little bit apart, but 2 Friday night games, 2 good games against each other on Saturday night. I don't know. Could have definitely done better with scheduling this weekend, surely. Have a look at yourself, AFL. Be better, surely. Anyway, first game of the round. We've got Bulldogs Melbourne. This will be at Marvel Stadium Friday night. Slightly early start than normal. It's 7:15 start due to there being another game as well. At time of recording, there is exactly 1 day to go until this game starts. First up, we'll have a look at the lineups. We'll move through some stats as we always do. First up, no change for the Doggies. They're flying at the moment, so why would they make a change unless they had to? Melbourne, they've got 3 changes. They've got Blake Howes, Tom Sparrow and Thorthorpe coming in. Out going Caleb Windsor injured. And then Jack Billings and Bailey Laurie both omitted. It's been a weird sort of season for both of these teams. They met in round 1, and Melbourne won that one by 45 points in what was a very comfortable victory. Doggies looked really poor that day, but since then they've had some troughs as well, but their recent form has been very good. Melbourne, they looked pretty good early season, but have kind of fallen away a little bit of late. They still have a chance to make finals. They're 11th on the ladder. They'd probably have to win 3 games out of their 4, but that is entirely possible. They have beaten the Bulldogs by 45 points, as we said, in round 1 this year. Last year they met in round 1 as well, and the Demons won that one by 50 points. So good little record over the last 2 years. But for the Melbourne, and of course they met in the grand final in 2021, which Melbourne won that one as well. There's been games in between, and Bulldogs did beat them in 2022 in round 19. Form, obviously Bulldogs' form is incredible. They've beaten 3 of the top 4 teams in the last, well, not top 4 teams, top 5 or 6 teams in the last 3 weeks. They beat Sydney last week up in Sydney, huge win by 39 points. Week before that they smacked Geelong down at the Cattery in the Mud Bowl, and the week before that they beat Carlton by 14 points. So they're absolutely flying. Melbourne, a couple of weeks ago, it looked like they'd resurrected their season a little bit. They beat the Eagles and then they followed it up with a big win over the Bombers. But their last 2 weeks lost to Fremantle over there comfortably by like 50 exactly 50 points. And then last week in Melbourne, played against GWS, had their chances but just couldn't get the scores on the board and lost by 2 points to GWS, which could be costly for them. Let's be honest. A win there would have put them back right in the contention of finals. Now they've got to play really good for the rest of the year to get that win, I suppose. Looking at how the two teams play football, match up, defensively pretty similar, but Bulldogs are obviously the much better attacking team, fourth highest scoring team, and outside of occasionally a really bad game, they're really, like, their numbers look really good. You go back 4 weeks ago, they got smacked by the Port Adelaide Power and looked atrocious. Since then, though, they looked really, really good. Forward and defensive efficiency is pretty solid on the Bulldogs front. Melbourne's defensive efficiency is enormous. They give up a lot of inside 50s, but still only concede 78 points per game. So they are very good at defending for the amount of, I guess, territory they give up in a game. And if you're giving up more inside 50s than you're getting, you need to be able to be forward efficiency, like have good forward efficiency, and Demons don't have that, so that's kind of why they're not succeeding this year. They don't get enough inside 50s and they don't convert them into shots often enough. Also, Bulldogs' disposal efficiency ranked number 1 in the league, whereas Melbourne is back in 16th. Clearances, you'd imagine, will go the way of the Doggies. They tend to be very good in clearances. They've got a very, very strong midfield. Obviously, Tim English in the ruck, plus some very good on bowlers. Bontempelli is arguably the best player in the AFL. Treloar is huge. This season's been great. Ed Richards is good. Liberatore is really good. So they've just got really good numbers throughout the middle. Contested footy will probably go the way of the Doggies as well, although Demons aren't terrible at it. Uncontested footy will clearly go the way of the Dogs, you'd imagine. Both teams really good at the turnover game as well, so that's why it's surprising that the Doggies have kind of been so far down this year, because they win clearances, they win inside 50s, and they win the turnover game, so it's like they're creating all these opportunities. Their forward efficiency is good, their defensive efficiency is very good, their accuracy obviously isn't great, but all the numbers point towards them being top 2 team in the AFL. And maybe they will still be with the recent form they've put together. They're a chance to finish top 4 for sure. I also forgot, as I was reading out the teams, to mention the 3 milestone games this weekend. All for the Bulldogs. Lockie Bramble and Lachlan McNeil both playing their 50th AFL game, and the big one for the Bulldogs, Adam Treloar playing his 250th AFL game. Third club, arguably his best season of his career. He's really, really playing very well, averaging over 32 disposals a game. He's everywhere. He's been playing very, very well. So good luck and well done to him. It's hard to say the Demons could win this. The one thing they got on their side, I guess, here is the fact that Bulldogs are coming off the short break. They obviously played Sunday night, or Sunday afternoon, sorry, not Sunday night, Sunday afternoon. Now they're playing Friday. The team that did that last week was Carlton, and they didn't perform very well against Port Adelaide, so I wouldn't imagine it will be an issue for them, but it's worth noting that maybe that is the thing that just swings the momentum onto the side of Melbourne. The other Friday night game, West Coast Gold Coast. I don't think this is the most exciting game of the weekend, let's be honest, but strange things happen. Gold Coast will be going in as favourites, starting 8:30 Eastern time, so 6:30 Western time. What to say about this game? We'll do teams first, and then we'll have a chat about what we think of the match. First up, the Eagles. A lot of changes for them. They've got Alex Witherden, Liam Duggan, Jeremy McGovern, Harvey Johnson, Clay Hall, and Tyrell Dewar all coming in. Going out is a few injured players. Tom Barrass, Josh Rotham and Luke Edwards injured. 2 suspensions in Jack Petroselli and Jack Hutchinson. Obviously, Derby last week, there was a lot of fines, a lot of suspensions from that game. And also the final change is Jay Cully being omitted. So 5 out of the 6 changes were forced. For the Gold Coast, 2 changes, Braden Fiorini and Alex Sexton coming in. Going out, Ned Moyle and Thomas Berry both omitted. 2 milestones for West Coast. Brady Hall playing his 50th game and a debutant in Clay Hall playing his first AFL match. So good luck to him. What to say about this one? Gold Coast haven't won an away game yet, which is concerning. But surely, if they're going to beat anyone, it's going to be the Eagles. Although we said that, like a fortnight or 3 or 4 weeks, however many weeks ago it was, when they played North Melbourne in Melbourne and got beaten. So it's possibly going to be a close game. Eagles, for the first half last week against Fremantle, were really good. But they haven't been great of late outside of that first half. So I'm not real confident in them. They obviously met up on the Gold Coast earlier this year in round 7, and the Gold Coast won that one by 37 points. Last year, Gold Coast did go over to the West and beat the Eagles by 70 points. So they have that on their side. They've won the last 3 matchups. You'd have to think that not only do they go favourites into this, they should win it. Looking at the history of, I guess, both, the recent form of both teams, obviously West Coast are 0-5 over the last 5 weeks, and it's been even longer since they've won a game. And as I said, they haven't really looked that good. They played okay against Brisbane 3 weeks ago now. That was an okay game. Outside of that, they've kind of been smashed every week. Gold Coast, they beat Port Adelaide 3 weeks ago at home, and it looked like finals was still an option for them. They then had an away game against GWS, played pretty well, just couldn't convert on the scoreboard and lost that one. And then followed that up with their first loss at home for the year against Brisbane on the weekend. Which, while not effectively ruling out their season, it is still feasible that they make finals. They would have to win all 4 games. There's no doubt about it. It's not impossible. They've got West Coast here. And then I think they play Essendon next week. So 2 winnable road games. But, it's going to be very tough for them. West Coast, they're playing kind of for draft picks, I guess. It's still feasible that they finish wooden spoon based on who plays who for the rest of the year. One of the teams below them will draw level with them on wins, unless they win this one, of course, as the 2 bottom teams are playing each other. But yeah, they're just kind of getting towards the finish line. Keep getting games into their young players, develop that game plan, and see what happens, I guess. Pardon me. Game number 3, we finally move on to Saturday. We got North Melbourne, Richmond. As I said, bottom of the ladder clash. So 2 matches this weekend that are not going to be the most entertaining games of football. Granted, they could be close, so it's not the end of the world. Kangaroos going into this as favourites, interestingly. When I ran the numbers earlier, Richmond came out on top, so we'll see how that plays out. But lineups for the 2 teams: North Melbourne first, Toby Pink, Colby McKercher and Eddie Ford coming in. Going out, Griffin Logue and George Wardlaw both injured. Liam Shields has been managed, which is an interesting way of saying dropped. Richmond, they have 3 changes as well. Dustin Martin returns, Toby Nankervis returns, and Jack Graham is back. Going out is Samson Ryan and Thompson Dow omitted, and Caleb Smith is out for personal reasons. So two really big ins for Richmond, Dustin Martin, Toby Dankervis. Dusty's obviously not at his career best form, but he's still a very handy player. Dankervis is a very, very good player in good form as well. So big ins might help them here. Two milestones. Luke McDonald for North Melbourne will be playing his 200th game, while Ryan Mansell will be playing his 50th for Richmond. These two teams against each other, they met last in round 23 last year, so almost exactly a year ago, not quite, but almost. Richmond won that one by 29 points. Time before that was round 18 of 2022. North Melbourne won that one by 4 points. And then the time before that was round 21 of 2021. Richmond won that one by 33 points. So they typically only play each other once a year. And it's gone Richmond, North Melbourne. Richmond the last three, which tells you that North are going to win this one. Absolutely not. I'm not saying that. But that is what it comes out as there. Looking at the recent form, North Melbourne 1-4 over the last 5 weeks. Ever since the bye, they've been really competitive, pretty much in every game outside of the Sydney game, where they lost by like 69 or 70 points or whatever it was. I can't remember. Outside of that game, they've been really competitive since the bye. They did lose by 40 points last week to Geelong, but they were in it in the third quarter, just couldn't quite close it out. Richmond's form, better than it looks at 0-5 in the last 5, if we're being honest. 61-point loss to Carlton 5 weeks ago, not great. 50-point loss to Freo over in the West after that. 24-point loss to GWS is pretty solid. It was in Melbourne. They only lost by 40 points to Port Adelaide and were right in it in the third quarter. And then against Collingwood last week, they only lost by 26. So, yes, they were 0-5 over 5 weeks. I don't think their form is as bad as it looks. When you compare these two teams, obviously neither of them are good at scoring, while they both concede quite a lot of points. It will be interesting to see how that plays out. North Melbourne are a very accurate team, number 1 accurate team in the AFL. Richmond are number 18, so that may play a factor in this one. North Melbourne have played in quite a few high-scoring games, I guess, of late, over the last month or so. They've scored a little bit better than they were, or a bit more than a month since the bye. So you could probably put them down for a 75 plus here. I'd say probably score 90 plus. Will Richmond be able to keep up with that? I don't know. It's been a while since they've scored 90 plus. But if they're going to do it against anyone, it would be North Melbourne. Obviously, North Melbourne's forward efficiency is the worst in the league. Their defensive efficiency is second worst in the league. Richmond, not much better, 16th and 16th in both of those categories. Both teams concede a lot of inside 50s. Two worst teams in the league. Centre clearances across the board. North Melbourne are really good at that area. For a young midfield, it's a very positive sign. They don't convert it into inside 50s and opportunities too often, but it's at least a sign that they can get their hands on the ball in the middle. Contested footy, both teams pretty ordinary. Uncontested footy, North Melbourne are okay at that area. They were really good in that area against Geelong last week. Both teams struggle in the tackling department. North Melbourne a bit better. And then in the turnover game, they are the two worst teams. However, North Melbourne are a mile behind Richmond, who are the second worst. Like, a mile behind. An extra 5 turnovers per game. So, that's probably Richmond's only chance to winning this one, is forcing I guess, a lot of turnovers from North Melbourne and converting them into chances up forward, because that's probably the only way they win this, I reckon. Next game up is the twilight game on Saturday. It's down at the Cattery, Geelong, Adelaide. Massive game for both teams. Geelong win it. They don't cement themselves as a finalist, but they certainly give themselves a very, very good chance with 13 wins on the season. It's almost enough. They only need to win 2 to guarantee finals from here on out. And you'd imagine that this is going to be one of them. They go in pretty short favourites. Adelaide have been pretty good in Melbourne this year, though. They've beaten Carlton and Essendon, both at Marvel. They took it right up to Collingwood at MCG. This is obviously at the Cattery, so a little bit different, but Geelong have not been impossible to beat at GMHBA this year. Off the top of my head, I don't know how many games they've lost there this year, but it is certainly a few, give or take a few. I'm trying to get my numbers up as I talk, but I don't think I've got them on hand. But yeah, they've definitely lost a few games there this year, so it's not impossible for them for the Crows to win this one. Looking at the teams as they've been announced, Geelong have 2 changes: Reece Stanley and Zach Tui coming back in. Out goes Mitch Duncan, who's managed, and Ted Closey, who is omitted. For the Crows, Nick Murray, Matt Crouch, Jordan Dawson and Josh Worrell are back, all in. So 2 big ins, mainly in Jordan Dawson and Matt Crouch. Jordan Dawson's a huge in for them. Out goes James Borley, Elliot Himmelberg and Braden Cook, all omitted. And then Chase Jones, who is out for personal reasons. Milestone game for Riley Thilthorpe, who's playing his 50th match of AFL football. These 2 teams against each other, they did meet in round 2 this year over in Adelaide. Geelong won it by 19 points. Last year they only met once, which was Geelong home game. Geelong won it by 26 points. And then in 2022 they met in round 11. Geelong home game, they won it by 42 points. So all the form between these 2 teams recently has gone the way of Geelong. They're the better team overall this season as well, so most things pointing their way. You look at the form for both teams. Geelong 4-1 over the last 5 weeks. Their one loss was against Bulldogs at the Cattery. Wasn't their best performance, but outside of that, the rest of their form's pretty good. They beat the Bombers by 45 points. They beat Hawthorn, who are one of the best form teams in the competition, by 51 points. They beat Collingwood by 20 points. They then lost, as I said, to the Bulldogs by 47, and then followed it up with a win against North Melbourne by 40. So 3 wins against teams fighting for finals. I don't know if any of those teams will make finals, but Hawthorn certainly a definite chance. So not terrible form there. Meanwhile, across the road for Adelaide, their form isn't bad. 3-2 over the last 5 weeks. It's a season of what could have been for them for sure. But, I mean, 5 weeks ago they beat GWS by 16 points. They lost to Brisbane by only 11 up at the Gabba, so that's a pretty good record, a pretty good performance when you look at how Brisbane have been, certainly since the bye. They then beat Adelaide by 32 points in the wet, beat Bombers by 2 points at Marvel, and then last week was a disappointing result where they lost by 66 points to the Hawthorn Hawks. Looking at the numbers, offensively Geelong are a lot better. Defensively, both teams are probably pretty similar. Most numbers just point towards Geelong, like they're just better in pretty much most categories. The main one where they're not is clearances, because Geelong are just not a clearance team. Haven't been all year. Probably won't be at any point this year. But that doesn't really affect them because they are so good on the turnover game. Number 1 turnover team in the AFL, and that leads them to winning the inside 50 count more often than not. And, I mean, their forward efficiency isn't great. It's ranked 10th in the AFL, but it's good enough for a team that gets more inside 50s than their opposition. Uncontested footy is probably the one area where Adelaide actually beat Geelong. Will that be a factor in this one? I don't know. Bulldogs obviously found Geelong out a couple of weeks ago, and they're also a very heavily uncontested football team. So maybe there's that, but you'd have to think Geelong at home against a team that's mathematically not capable of making finals. You'd just have to say Geelong win it and give themselves a chance at top 4, which is what they're certainly going to be aiming for at the moment. They're only one win from being in top 4, and obviously opposition needs to lose and stuff, but you know what I mean. So they have a genuine chance of making top 4 from here, and in order to do that, they have to win this game. We go on to Saturday night footy. 2 massive games on Saturday night. Both kind of must-watch games. First up, we'll look at Collingwood Carlton, MCG. 90,000 people, you'd have to imagine. It's going to be huge. Carlton will be going in comfortable favourites. However, it is Scott Pendlebury's 400th game. Will the Magpies get up for him? We'll wait and see. But it's going to be a big game to watch. It's going to be entertaining. A lot happen. So we'll look at teams. Collingwood have 3 changes. Beau McQuarrie, Geordie DeGoey and Billy Frampton all coming in. Going out is Harvey Harrison, Lockie Sullivan and Will Parker, all omitted. You'd have to say all 3 of those ins are probably better than all 3 of the outs. For Carlton, Jordan Boyd, Blake Acres, big in Harry Mackay, and also another big in Jack Martin. Out goes Lewis Young, Jack Carroll, Lachlan Cohen, all omitted, and David Cunningham injured. Jack Martin playing his 150th game, so good luck and well done to him. And as I mentioned before, Scotty Pendlebury playing his 400th AFL game. Massive accomplishment. Only, the 6th player to do that in the history of the game. A massive effort. These 2 teams obviously met in round 8. Collingwood won it by 6 points. Different Collingwood team back then, though. I mean, it's only 12, 13 weeks ago, whatever it is. 3 months, pretty much. But Collingwood have had a big drop-off over the recent times. Last year they met twice. Collingwood won the first one in round 10, and then they met again in round 20, and Carlton turned it around and won. So, does that happen again here? We'll see. Recent form for both teams is not great. Collingwood only winning 1 out of their last 5, which was last week against Richmond. Before that, they got smacked by Hawthorn, lost by 20 points to Geelong, 12 points to the Bombers, and 11 points to Gold Coast. So they're not getting smacked. Other than the Hawthorn one, they have been kind of in the games, so it's not the end of the world, but it is what it is. Meanwhile, Carlton, they've won 2 out of the last 5. They lost last week at home to Port Adelaide, which was a bit of a disappointing result for them. The week before, they only beat North Melbourne by 19 points, but they got the job done. They lost by 14 points to one of the informed teams in the Doggies. Lost by 12 points to GWS when they were 5 goals up early. And the week before that, they beat Richmond by 61 points. So, most things suggest Carlton should be going in favourites. Slightly better form, still not great. But it's hard to really confidently pick either team. Carlton need to win this if they want to finish top 4. They're currently still 4th on the ladder. They probably need to win 3 to finish top 4, you'd think. 2 wins probably isn't going to be enough for top 4. So they really would want to go out and win this one. After this game, though, it does get a bit easier, I think, for Carlton off the top of my head. I did a run home video earlier this week and I can't remember what I said in it, but go check it out. We talk all about who can make top 4, who's got the better run home and whatnot. Looking at the numbers, Collingwood are pretty much struggling both ends of the ground, whereas Carlton typically are very good offensively but struggle to stop teams from scoring against them. For a team that's sitting in the top 4, they concede way too many points. There's no doubt about it. They did better last week, which is funny because they only conceded 79. However, they only managed to score 65, which is 5 goals less than they usually score. So they finally shut a game down, but just didn't manage to score themselves. It's no doubt an area they need to work on. The defensive efficiency is ranked 11th. Both these teams are kind of similar in a lot of ways, outside of the fact that Carlton just score more than Collingwood. But like Collingwood's second best forward efficiency team, Carlton 4th, so pretty similar. Collingwood 10th best defensive efficiency, Carlton 11th. Neither team great at inside 50 differential, Collingwood 14th, Carlton 11th. Carlton are the better clearance team slightly, 1 extra clearance a game. Contested footy is clearly Carlton's bread and butter. It's what they're known for. They win it most weeks. Last month hasn't been spectacular, but they're still plus 8.5 contested possessions a game, whereas Collingwood are -2. Another area that these two teams are massively different, not just contested footy, uncontested footy. Collingwood gets smacked in that week in, week out, especially of late. Hawthorn put an absolute clinic on in the wet of uncontested footy. It's certainly something that I guess Collingwood probably need to look at here. They did slightly better last week. They just lost it to Richmond. They need to go as close as they can to breaking even in the uncontested footy if they want to win this one. Number 1 tackling team Collingwood against number 14 tackling team in Carlton. So if there's going to be a chance for them to win the uncontested footy, this might be it. Because Carlton aren't the best pressure/tackling team. Turnover game, this is such a weird stat because if you go back 4 weeks, I think, well, certainly at the bye, maybe even a couple of weeks after the bye, I think it was up until the Essendon game was a bad one, and then since then it's been terrible. Collingwood were like ranked 1 and then ranked 2 for a lot of weeks in the turnover game. They've dropped back to 8th. They just haven't been able to win that area of the game at all lately. It's the main area that their game has just dropped off. Obviously, the uncontested footy differential has also dropped off, but a lot also in the turnover game. It's what they prided themselves on, I guess, for the first up until the bye, but since then it's been a real struggle for them. Whereas Carlton are improving in that facet. You would do, just an explanation on that stat, you do want a minus number in that bottom row in the intercept turnover game, so the more negative it is, the better. The other Saturday night game is a Port Adelaide Sydney. Massive riding on this game. It's at Adelaide Oval. It's hopefully going to be a cracker. Port Adelaide currently favourites, only just. It's going to be tight in the markets. Port Adelaide in form, Sydney not in form. It'll be certainly an interesting one. Port Adelaide not made any changes for this one. Alir is playing his 150th AFL game, and Lockie Jones is playing his 50th game. For Sydney, 2 changes. James Rowbottom is back, as is Aaron Francis coming in. Going out is Lewis Melican injured, and Braden Campbell is omitted. These two teams, they met in round 4 last year, so it has been a long time since these two teams met. And Port Adelaide won that one in Sydney by 2 points. 2022 they met in round 14, and Port Adelaide won that one by 23. So Port have got the last couple. It's in Adelaide, sorry. Sometimes my words don't work. A lot of things pointing towards a Port Adelaide win here. They obviously went to Melbourne last week and beat Carlton. They were playing great football. They've won 4 of their last 5. One of them was against Bulldogs, who's one of the form teams of the competition. Outside of that, the other wins were St Kilda, Richmond, and Carlton's a big win in Melbourne. Their one loss, Gold Coast for a Gold Coast home game, so not the worst loss of all time. Meanwhile, Sydney have lost 4 of their last 5, and their only win in that was against North Melbourne. So 17th on the ladder. What's that tell you? They're struggling. They lost 2 of those at home, one to Fremantle and one to the Doggies. And granted, their loss to Brisbane at the Gabba wasn't bad. They fought hard. They nearly got the win. Their biggest issue is obviously their starts to the game. Until they start winning first quarters, you can't back them confidently. They're just giving head starts week in, week out. Like, they pretty much lost this game last weekend against the Bulldogs in that first quarter. I think they were down by 4 or 5 goals, and they only ended up losing by 37 points, 39 points, whatever it is. 39. And they were 5 goals down in the first quarter. So they've basically given up the whole match-winning margin in that first quarter. Granted, the last quarter, they kicked the last 3 goals. So they did kind of come back for once the game was over. But, nonetheless, they're just giving up too many first quarter leads. Even against North Melbourne, they nearly lost the first quarter. They kicked a goal on the siren or within the last minute to take the lead in the first quarter. Outside of that, they've been getting smacked in the first quarters, though. It's certainly an area they need to work on. They're still the number 1 offense team. However, now they average under 100 per game. They've only made it to 100 once in the last 5 weeks, and that was against North Melbourne. Still number 1 defensive team in terms of points against, averaging, just under 73 points per game. However, they have conceded more than that in 4 of their last 5 games. The only time they didn't, you guessed it, was against North Melbourne. So, things not going in the right trajectory for Sydney. They've got plenty of time to turn it around. There's still 4 weeks left of footy before finals. They've won enough that they're playing finals. They need a couple more, though, to guarantee them a top 2 spot. There's no doubt about it. They should finish top and at worst second, but they certainly need to find some form. They don't have the hardest run home after... they don't have the easiest run home either, actually, let's be honest. So they've got Port Adelaide this week. They've got Collingwood at home next week. I think they have Essendon in Melbourne in the second last week, and I can't remember who they play in the final week. But certainly winnable games, all of them. This one, probably their toughest, and also probably their most important. Meanwhile, Port Adelaide win this, they have still a chance for top 4, outside chance for top 4, but a chance nonetheless. Number 1 forward efficiency team in the league is Port Adelaide. It's their biggest asset. They're really good at territory battle. They're ranked 6 in inside 50 differential and number 1 in forward efficiency. Their major concern is the fact that their accuracy is really poor. It's cost them a couple games this year already. It's probably the thing that they need to work on the most, because it will. If finals footy tends to be close, like last year, all but one game was like under 10 points, I think, and games will be decided by kicking straight. So that's probably their biggest thing they need to make sure they work on before finals. Even recently, they're struggling. Last 2 weeks, they've kicked more behinds than goals. And 3 out of 5 weeks, they have. Yes, they won all 3 of those games, but you get away with it in round 17 or round 20. Will you get away with that in a prelim final? Probably not. Big game, both teams. It could be a cracker. Hopefully will be a cracker. Port Adelaide, still a chance for top 4. If they win this, that's certainly still a chance. We've got 3 games left, the 3 Sunday games, and we've got another cracker. Very important match, this one. GWS Hawthorn. It's at Manuka Oval. Winner puts themselves very much in finals contention. Loser might be in strife. Hawthorn don't have the toughest run home. Their next 2 weeks are huge. They got GWS, then Carlton, but then their final 2 weeks, I think, is like Richmond, West Coast, or something like that. So Hawthorn, if they can win either this one or Carlton, you can book them into finals. They're there. They're done. If they lose this one and Carlton, all of a sudden there's a little bit of pressure on those last 2 games. They can still make finals, but put a little bit of pressure on themselves. Meanwhile, GWS have probably potentially the hardest run home of anybody in the AFL. They need to win this. If they don't win this, it's going to be hard for them to play finals. They've got 12 wins already. You'd think 13 might be enough. Might. But you'd want 14 if I was them. So they need to win this and then win one more, I reckon. Just to make sure that they're safe. Obviously, this is a Sunday game, so we don't have teams. Well, we have teams, but we have extended benches, is what I was looking for. GWS have Max Grukowski, Connor Stone, Lachlan Keefe, and Ryan Angwin all in. Going out is Jake Riccardi injured. Obviously, there will be a couple more outs. For Hawthorn, Cam McKenzie, Jai Sarong, Harry Morrison, and Jack Gunston all coming in. Out is Finn McGuinness omitted. These 2 teams have met once this year. It was down in Launceston in round 13. Hawthorn won it by 6 points. After trailing by 19 at half time, they turned it on in the second half and got over the line in what was an entertaining match. You go back last year, they met twice. I was going to say somehow GWS were home both games, but one of them would have been gather round. GWS won both games last year, one by 13 points and the other one by 2. So solid enough record there for GWS. Hawthorn, though, obviously took the last one, and Hawthorn are flying at the moment. Both teams 4-1 over the last 5 weeks, putting together really decent runs towards finals. However, GWS have not been overly convincing. 5 weeks ago, they lost to Adelaide, and that looked like their season was almost done there. And then, however, since then, they beat Carlton after being 5 goals back in the first quarter. They only beat Richmond by 24 points. They beat Gold Coast by 39. And then last week they beat Melbourne by 2 points, only just holding on. Meanwhile, Hawthorn are absolutely flying. They beat West Coast comfortably. They lost massively to Geelong. Then they beat Freo down in Tassie. And then they've played their best 2 performances the last 2 weeks. They beat Collingwood by 66 points in the wet. And then followed that up going to Adelaide Oval and beating Adelaide by 66 points. So Hawthorn flying. GWS in form. Manuka Oval, Sunday afternoon. It's a must-watch, really. It's going to be a great game. Winner really gives themselves a good chance of finals. Loser puts a lot of pressure on themselves. But as I said, if Hawthorn win this one, you can probably book them in for finals. Looking at differences between the 2 teams, it's weird because obviously Hawthorn's numbers were so bad for the first 5, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, that if you just take the numbers since then, it's a lot different. Whereas GWS did a lot of their winning in that first 7 weeks. I think they won 6 out of their first 7 and then have basically broken even since. Offensively, GWS do score slightly more. Defensively, pretty similar. Forward efficiency is similar for both teams. Defensive efficiency, GWS are the better team, but does that mean much here? Inside 50 differential goes the way of Hawthorn. They're really good at controlling the field throughout games. Clearances, Hawthorn are certainly improving in that area. Overall, it's not great, but it is improving. I would imagine that they will win clearances here. They've been pretty solid recently. They beat Freo in clearances down in Tassie a few weeks ago, which was a huge performance from them against the number one clearance team in the AFL. Contested footy, pretty similar for both teams. Uncontested, massively in the favour of GWS. Would imagine that they will dominate it. Tackles, once again, GWS. They bring the pressure. They don't let their opposition have too many uncontested footy. However, Collingwood do the same, and Hawthorn just managed to just control the uncontested game. Turnover game, not too dissimilar for both teams. Hawthorn, one of the best in the business. GWS, not terrible, but also not the greatest. So that's this game. It will be a cracker. It will potentially be a kick either way. Or, if Hawthorn do what they've done the last 2 weeks, they'll win by 100. That's not true. They won't win by 100. But you know what I mean. 2 games left of the round. Essendon, Freo. Big game for Essendon. Not as big for Freo, but still important. If they want to play top 4, they'll want to be winning this one. It's in Melbourne, and the Dockers are favourites. Who would have thought that they'd be going into a game in Melbourne favourites? They've been pretty good in Melbourne this year. They've won a couple already. I think they've won 3. They won their first 3. I think they lost their last one comfortably, but solid record so far. Bombers obviously are in free fall. They need a win. If they lose this one, you can probably say they're not going to be playing finals. They've still got a chance. They play the next 2 weeks are huge. They play Freo and then Gold Coast both at Marvel, and then they play Sydney at Marvel as well, who aren't in great form. So potentially the next 3 weeks are all winnable games for them, but they need to do better than what they've shown the last couple of weeks. A lot of changes so far for both teams. Obviously, extended benches. Bombers, Jake Kelly, Ben Hobbs, Nick Bryan, Alwyn Davey Jr. and Archie Roberts all coming in. Going out is Jordan Ridley injured and Archie Perkins omitted. For Fremantle, Erasmus, Liam Reedy, Cooper Simpson and Will Brodie coming in. Out goes Nate Fyfe suspended. Obviously, they are extended benches. A few milestones to talk about here. Cole Langford playing his 150th game for the Bombers. Caleb Sarong playing his 100th game for Fremantle. One of the better first 100 games there has been in the league. He is an absolute superstar. 2 debutants, 1 for each team. Archie Roberts for the Bombers. Liam Reedy for the Dockers. These 2 teams haven't met since round 15 last year, so it's been a little while. Fremantle won it by 32 points over in the West. The year before was played in Melbourne, and the Dockers won that one by 48 points. So pretty good record going the way of the Dockers against the Bombers. And the form also goes the way of the Dockers. They've won 4 of their last 5. Their one loss was to Hawthorn down in Launceston. Other than that, they haven't been playing the best teams. They did beat Sydney though, by a point in Sydney, so that was a really good win. Other than that, though, they beat Richmond in WA. They beat Melbourne in WA, and then obviously they beat West Coast also in WA last week. Essendon, they got smacked by Geelong 5 weeks ago. Then they turned it around and beat Collingwood, and it was like, oh, that's still a chance. That's still going all right. But then since then, they've lost to Melbourne. They lost to Adelaide at Marvel. And then last week, they got absolutely demolished by St Kilda. And their season is very fast looking like last year. They probably almost need to win 3, I would say. 2 wins might be enough for them to play finals. 3 would be better. And in order to get 3 wins, they have to win this one and they have to beat Gold Coast. If they don't win this week, that might be all she wrote for the Dons. But we will see what happens. It's a big game. It's Fremantle in Melbourne, so they're a chance. It's going to be tough, though. They're just conceding too many points, really. They conceded 108 last week. They conceded 115 the week before. The 84 the week before doesn't look as bad, but that's 84 against Melbourne. Melbourne are not an offensive team, and it was in the wet as well. And then 5 weeks ago, conceded 105 to Geelong. So 3 out of 5 weeks they've conceded over 100, which you're just not going to win games of football when you're consistently conceding over 100. It just makes sense, doesn't it, really? Fremantle, meanwhile, they're offensively looking a lot better. They're only ranked 7th at the moment, but you go back 6, 8, 10 weeks, they were 11th, 12th, 13th, even in offensive scoring. Lately, they've been really good. 110 last week, 116 the week before, only 74 down in Tassie against Hawthorn, but then 4 weeks ago, 105, and then 5 weeks ago, 99. So 4 out of 5 weeks, they've scored 99 or above. So their average score is just going up, and it's the perfect time to be doing that, hitting form before finals. They're already pretty much ranked 2nd defensively, just behind Sydney, but they're certainly one of the best teams defensively, and now that they're starting to also develop their offense a lot, they're a dangerous team. I've been on their bandwagon a little bit of late. They win this, they're certainly a top 4 chance. You wouldn't want to be going over to the West to play them, but even if you have a home game against them, you wouldn't be confident against them. They're very good. They're the number 1 clearance team across the board. Contested footy, uncontested footy, tackling, they do all the important stuff. They win the inside 50 differential. They're just a very good football team. Essendon also win the territory battle, but they just don't convert it. Their main issue is their efficiency. It's been their main issue all year long. I've harped on it a lot. Ranked 15th for forward efficiency and 15th for defensive efficiency. You're just not going to win games doing that. Even with winning the inside 50 differential, if you're just not turning them into shots, and then vice versa up the other end, you're just not stopping the opposition from having shots, even though they're not getting it up their end too often. You're just giving up too many shots. It's basically the simple of it, and it's a problem. It's not impossible for them to turn it around. I'm not writing their season off by any stretch. They've got 10.5 wins. 12.5 might get you finals. 13.5 will 100% get you finals. So it's not the end of the world, but if they peter out and don't win another game this year, you have to ask questions, because will be 2 years in a row that they've done it after looking like certainties for finals, fallen apart and fallen out of the 8, and you would have to ask questions. There's no doubt about that. Final game of the round, St Kilda Brisbane. It's in Melbourne at Marvel Stadium. The hottest team in the AFL, Brisbane Lions, I think they've won 8 in a row against a team in St Kilda who actually is starting to play much better football. There's no doubt about it. They've started attacking a bit more, and it's starting to really show with how they've played lately, and their results are proof of that. Changes, obviously extended benches, but changes so far. We got Philippou, Paddy Dow, Tom Campbell and McLennan all coming in for St Kilda. Out going Hunter Clark injured. Mitch Owen's 50th game, and Angus McLennan is debuting, if he gets the nod, obviously. Meanwhile, for Brisbane, Harris Andrews, big return. Obviously, they had Eric Hipwood playing his role last week, which was interesting and maybe not the most successful thing of all time, but they got the win, so it doesn't matter. Also coming in, James Madden, Darcy Fort, and Bruce Revel coming back in after a really good game in the VFL for him. Out at the moment goes Connor McKenna, omitted. Ryan Lester playing his 200th game. Lot of milestone games this weekend. These two teams met not that long ago, actually, in round 14 up at the Gabba. Brisbane only won it by 20 points, which is a little bit of a positive sign, I guess, for St Kilda. And that was the kind of the turning point for St Kilda's season, if we're being honest. Up until that week, like the week before, had been very defensive orientated, hadn't worried about scoring. It was just score more than the other team, even if it's 45-46. Just don't let them score. And then they played Brisbane. They went out full attack mode, and Ross Lyon afterwards was like, "See, we went attacking and we lost. It doesn't mean anything." But you're playing Brisbane at the Gabba. Like, it's not a game you were expected to win. You weren't expected to get within 20 points. That's for freaking sure. So St Kilda learned a little bit there, I think, because recently they've been a lot better. You look, last 2 weeks they've scored over 100 both weeks. 108 against Essendon, 113 against West Coast. Even scoring 84 against Sydney 4 weeks ago. 84 is a solid score. It was the fact that they were always in the 60s before that was the issue. 39 against Adelaide was not great in between there, but it was a wet weather game. They just didn't show up. Meanwhile, Brisbane, as we said, they've won 8 in a row. Not a lot going wrong for them. They've moved into second on the ladder. Who saw that happening even at the bye? It was pretty hard to see them finishing in the top 2. Now it's hard seeing them not finishing top 2. They don't have the easiest run home, but it's also not the hardest run home. If they go down to Melbourne and win this one, that's certainly a very, very strong chance to stay in the top 2. It's even possible that they finish top of the ladder, which would be absurd. Absolutely absurd. Looking at the matchup, as I said, St Kilda have been a lot more offensive-minded lately. They're the number 3 defensive team. And if they can keep that going while also improving that offense, you don't have to go to 100 points a game. But if you can get that up to like 85 average, it's huge. That's plus 11 points a game would be massive. Meanwhile, Brisbane score well, defend really well. Their forward efficiency was probably their big issue early season because they were dominating all year long inside 50 territory, but they just couldn't convert it into shots. It was their major issue, and they kicked poorly for goal as well. They still kind of kick poorly for goal, let's be honest, but they've certainly improved that forward efficiency, and that's why they're starting to get wins. There's no doubt about that. Looking at it, clearances, probably not too dissimilar. Brisbane are the slightly better team. Contested footy will be hot in this one. Both teams pride themselves on contested football, so it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. Uncontested footy, Brisbane are the better team in that area. Neither team huge in tackling, so which is surprising, being that both teams are very heavily contested. Turnover game should go the way of the Lions. So if the Lions follow these numbers, it's hard to see them losing, being that they win clearances, they win turnover game, they win inside 50s, and they win forward efficiency. They should win. However, it's at Marvel. St Kilda are certainly a better team than they were even last time these two teams met. So St Kilda are a big chance in this. There's no doubt about that. Final thing to do before we wrap this episode up is have a look at the tips. We're on 111 going into round 21. 9 big games. First up, we're going the Bulldogs over Melbourne. Little slight concern with the fact that Bulldogs on the short break, but we got them by 28. We got Gold Coast getting their first away win of the season. I just can't back West Coast. Next up, Richmond by 3. I don't know why, because North Melbourne have been the better team since the bye, but the numbers said Richmond, so I went with Richmond. Geelong by 17. They should be too good for Adelaide. Carlton by 9 points over Collingwood to ruin a Pendlebury's party. Port Adelaide by 3 to give Sydney another loss. That would be huge. Hawthorn by 5 points to not guarantee, but all but guarantee them for finals. Fremantle by 13 to give themselves a very good chance at top 4. And Brisbane rounding out the week to maybe push towards a top 2 spot. Oh, top of the ladder spot even. I have them by 11. That's me tips for the week. Big round of football. Let me know down the bottom in the comments who you're tipping this weekend. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, definitely subscribe. Our numbers are slowly growing. Let's see how fast we can rise. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. Whether you just watch a little bit or a lot, I appreciate you. Don't forget to check out all the social medias. It's at All Aussie Rules everywhere. Thanks for tuning in. And I'll catch us in the review episode on Monday. Thank you and goodbye.